Van Winkle?
Yes.
Mr. Kleinfelder?
Present.
Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Webb?
Okay, floor is yours. Dr. Couple?
Yes, sir. Before we get into the agenda, I wanted to tell you that you have a revised agenda at your table. There was
For regular session?
regular session.
Yep.
There was an addition. It is posted online. That is the start and ending times for next school year. So I did add a new agenda, and also the MOU is behind that, which is also posted online for the public. So today's agenda, you have in front of you, Mrs. Wright and Mr. Martin are going to talk about a couple items. Mrs. Wright will get into the Ohio State testing results. I think it's important that we brief the board on our test scores. The reading scores have not come in yet. They'll be in mid-June. We'll get into graduation credits. Mr. Martin again and Mrs. Wright will give that presentation. There'll be a quick curriculum update. The next item on the work session agenda is a conversation about the Plan B savings. And again, that's just a conversation at this point. And then finally, Mr. Frazier will talk about the 5-year forecast. So those are the items for the work session. So at this point, Mrs. Wright, you are up. And there's in your packet, there's a section on curriculum updates.
Thanks for having me tonight, and Dr. Kunkel and I had talked about some of the important things that we wanted to share with you before the end of the year, which is happening today, but for us the year kind of continues for a little bit. So our goals today are just to share those report card scores so far, the proficiency achieved on these tests, math, science, and social studies for grades 3 through 12. Reading scores won't be out until June 20th, I believe, is the release date for those. There's board policy and changes to the number of graduation credits needed. We get those recommendations from the OSBA, and typically we like transfer those over word from word. We've had conversations with Dr. Kunkel and Mr. Martin, and so we want to share a little bit about our reasoning there. And the last piece is just about curriculum adoptions and implementations that occurred throughout this school year, and then those that we're looking at for next year. So for our mathematics, our spring 2022 average is listed up there right here, and then we have the state average. So these are our scores for proficiency. So these are the percentage of students who met proficient or higher. And this is what the state averages scores are for that year. I also put in here last year's spring 2021 and state average scores there. And this is when we actually performed a lot higher than most of the districts in the county and then in the state that were similar to us. Our performance index for all of our schools were the top, except for Elda, and that's because Morgan was ahead of Elda for that one. So I did star a few of these for 5th grade. For 5th grade, this 77% is higher than any of those that I've listed here for these 3 previous years. And so I wanted to highlight that a little bit. The 5th grade is moving up. Last year they had a 50%. And so this is a significant difference for this 5th grade class. Also in geometry, the 74% is the highest that we've had for these past several years. And the EOCs are a little bit differently how they're done. We have some spring ones and we have some fall ones. And then in different school years, there have been different reasonings why there's a lower student count. For science, our 5th grade science performs super well. This 89% is higher than any of the other times that they've gotten in those past years. And then actually looking at the state average, that's a significant difference. Looking at their spring 2021 scores at 75% proficient, they rocked it out. They did a great job. Our scores, looking at just the science scores in general, we were improving from that 75% in the spring for 5th and 8th grade for both grade levels. And then the biology in the spring, we were kind of just about like the same. 80%, we still went up a percent in spring 2022. So I'm really pleased with those scores.
Tracy?
Yes.
Back one.
So 15% for Algebra 1 at the state level. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
For fall. So like there's still a high count of students. So they'll tell you like the count of students in the state average. But still, like there was, even if there was 24,000 students who took it, 15% was the state average of those students who took it in the fall.
Okay.
And so those might even have been repeat test takers, like students who have failed in the past and had to retake.
Okay.
So that's most likely the case. And so if, they had failed in the past, and they may struggle again for that. So that's this important part over here with like the fall and the spring, like that's an important part to look at because most of the students in the state take it in the spring. But still 45% in the spring, and that's most of the students in the state.
Okay.
And so 75%, that's great. That's fantastic. And it's, really just looking at those past several years, like it's just really right on track where we've been, and we've been performing really well for many years, even though, we're always, striving to improve that score, and our teachers are working really hard, and we've tried some different, and I'll share that in the curriculum updates. Like we worked through the restart readiness assessments, and some of the teachers implemented some of those practices in their classroom this year to kind of give them some experience with some checkpoints for pre and post test, and then information they can use as high quality student data for their 22-23 school year.
Tracy, what's the last column in the same cohort? Was that?
Okay, so the same cohort, we talked about that a little bit in the fall when we shared last year's score. So this is basically so the third grade wouldn't have a cohort yet because third grade's the first year. So for fourth grade, this is what they scored in 2021. So they scored 84% in 2021. Here they are here. So just to try to be able to have a little bit of a comparison. I'm always throwing different pieces of data in there, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to everybody else, but then I'm just kind of wanting to follow that. And I think Brian does some of that work too, behind the scenes. So I think that, that's just helpful to be able to see. Sometimes just looking at that class go along, not just looking at the teacher's data. And then for social studies, this is only EOCs at the high school. Of course, it's the same kind of situation where we have fall counts and spring counts. So the state average for fall looks a little different because it's different population of students taking that assessment. However, in the spring is when most students take it, and those percentages aren't very high anyways for the state average. We do a great job, and I don't know exactly how some of this data works in the past because students have been able to make some different choices over the last several years because of COVID, and some students have been able to use their grade as a replacement for their government score. And so for that reason, that's why there's just not a lot of data available for some of those pieces. But that wouldn't be typical moving forward. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions about those three areas? Okay. So here's our ELA, and so once we get to June, I believe it's June 20th, I'll fill these pieces in too. And so after tomorrow sometime or tonight, I'll share this presentation with all of you on the board so that you have this to review if you like. And then once June comes, I'll drop that in, and then I'll send another email to you letting you know that those scores have been dropped in. Okay. So graduation requirements for 22-23, there's board policy for approval, and that board policy, the graduation requirements are 20 credits. And so, like I had said previously, Dr. Conkle and I had conversations, and then I have had a long conversation with Mr. Martin talking about some of the reasoning for a higher or inflated graduation requirement for credits, and then a reasonings for not inflating that. And so basically looking at the block schedule, students over 4 years take 32 classes, right? And they have enough, well, not 32 classes, I'm sorry. They take 8 classes a year over 4 years, that's 32 total. And so that's enough to have 32 credits. So that's a pretty high amount of credits considering if you are in a regular, so it's a lot of credits, a lot of opportunities for things that students in a traditional high school don't have. A lot of times there's just 7 Bell classes with a study hall. So over 4 years, that's about 24 credits they can earn. When we say like, you know, our graduation requirement is 23.5 or 22.5 or whatever it is, it's really easily attainable for most of our students because there's lots of opportunity over 4 years to do it on a block schedule. The students that have the most difficult time with it are students who struggle anyways to earn graduation credits. So we're asking them to earn this greater amount when they're having a hard time with content, and we have less people and less time and less financial resources to dedicate towards that. And so we kind of bounce back and forth talking about that piece, and for me it came down to like, it feels kind of like a punishment in some cases because most of our students can earn that easily, and we're kind of punishing this population of students. It doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel equitable. And so there's some pieces in there about the financial cuts. So like for our double block math and ELA classes, we aren't able to offer those anymore. So that's a reduction in the amount of time that we can spend with students trying to meet that requirement. There are new graduation requirements released that are graduation seals, so it gives some different pathways for students to meet expectations that we haven't had before. Next year, Jake will probably dive a little bit more into that and work a little bit more with the high school on graduation seals. And like overall, we're not changing our expectations for students. We have high quality education for students. We're able to offer that. Our rigor that is in the classrooms and those high expectations are going to remain, whether the credits are 30 credits to graduate or 15 credits to graduate. Is not going to change based on that number. And then Brian, I'm going to hand it off to you. See if you want to share.
So yeah, I think probably the visceral reaction is when you start having a conversation about lowering the amount of credit for graduation. It feels like, well, we're lowering our standards, right? I mean, that's kind of the visceral reaction that people might have. The reality is that this change, if implemented, will impact a very, very small percentage of our students. And as Tracy indicated, it's going to impact the kids that it impacts the most are the kids who are struggling to get a diploma, right? The vast majority of our kids easily blow right past 23 and a half, 25, 27, 28 credits. I was looking at the top 10 students before I came into the meeting. The kids in the top 10 are mid-30s, some are close to 40 because of the extra opportunities that they take advantage of that are to them, that are available to them. So once again, the reality is that when you start talking about this small cohort of students, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, why are we doing this? Why are we putting this additional hurdle in front of these kids when the state of Ohio says that we don't need to do this? The state of Ohio says that 20 credits is what's required for graduation. As I indicate down there at the bottom, Lakota, the district in the county that we are most comparable to academically, they require 20 credits. Edgewood 21, Wyoming 21, Madeira 21 and a half, Sycamore 21.5. So, the argument or the belief that the number of credits is what determines the quality of education, that's just not the reality. It's just not that simple. We are currently the highest in the county in terms of what we require. The other high school in the county or the other district that is at 23.5 is Madison. Walnut Hills, widely regarded as the top performing high school in the state of Ohio, is at 22. Now, with all due respect to the Mohawks of Madison, no reasonable person would argue that Madison, is a superior high school to Walnut Hills simply because they have a higher number of credits required for graduation. So I think we need to, like I said, really ask ourselves, why are we putting this additional hurdle in front of our kids? Particularly in the climate that we're in right now. Mr. Van Winkle, Dr. Conkle, and some others have sat through student presentations in recent months. One of the top themes that we have heard from students is the amount of stress that they're dealing with, the amount of anxiety, the amount of pressure they feel as it relates to the situations that we're dealing with in the world right now. And so I think this is another opportunity to kind of release the burden that some of our kids who struggle anyway are dealing with. And the other reality to this is that, frankly, we just are not going to have the resources to be able to support these kids, at least moving forward in the short term, that we have had in the past. As you all know, we have cut a counselor from the high school. The amount of time that counselors have to invest with these struggling students just to get them over that hurdle of graduation, it is an intensive process, and we just don't have the bodies to do that right now. There is also the financial cost associated with the credit recovery classes that we have to purchase for these kids. The other thing to keep in mind is that these are elective classes. That's what we're talking about. The state sets forth the required core classes that are required for graduation. So when we talk about going from 23 and a half down to 20, we're talking about eliminating 3.5 elective credits. It's not math, it's not English, it's not required science classes or social studies. It's and once again, I'm not taking away from any of the classes I'm about to name, but they're elective classes. We're talking about baking and pastry. We're talking about strength training. We're talking about maybe a optional psych class or sociology class. So we're not talking about those core classes that the state requires for graduation. We're basically investing financial and personnel resources into these kids earning additional elective credits. The other thing that's really difficult to justify, particularly to kids and families who fall just short, is one of the questions I often get when I talk to these parents of kids who don't make it, who fall a couple of credits short, is, well, why, if the state says it has to be 20, why does Ross require 23 and a half? And, well, because we just do, and that's not a very good answer to give a kid or a family who has just failed to graduate from high school, because we have decided as a local school district that that we've kind of arbitrarily come up with this number. So once again, this isn't about lowering the quality of our instruction. The vast majority of our kids excel, and they're going to continue to excel, and they're going to continue to blow by whatever credit limit we put in place. This is about dealing with a very specific population of kids and making sure that we're not placing undue burdens on them, as well as an additional financial and resource burden on ourselves.
Keith, you have anything for what kind of?
How many teachers is that going to save us?
How many teachers is it going to save us?
Yeah, that's 3.5 credits. You got 900 kids in the school, so that's 900. That's about 3,150 credits that we're not going to have to issue. if you take that divided by 30 kids in a class, that's roughly about 100 classes we wouldn't have to offer. So there ought to be some savings.
Well, I would say the fallacy in that math is that you're saying that all 900 kids are going to not continue to take a high number of credits. Like I said, the vast majority of our kids are going to continue to take advantage of every opportunity offered to them.
All right, and I understand that. But at some point, it's a financial burden to us as a school system at a time when we have already made serious cuts. And I as a principal, I would never advocate for cuts in any way. You always are fighting for more and more people, because one of my problems we've had that I think this board has is we're trying to survive. What are we doing to meet the needs of the kids for the next half of this century, the future, in any curriculum, academically, technologically? We're just trying to keep the doors open. So my argument, so it's not really saving us anything, is what? Because you're going to still have kids take 28 credits. I mean,
Yes.
At some point.
I think it will save us in the sense that we're not going to be paying for kids to take online credit recovery courses for that population of kids, for that small population of kids. Because right now we're writing checks for these kids to take these additional credits, to take these additional this is an additional 3.5 credits for
And we're also writing
20,
checks
20.
for the kids that got 40 credits to CCP courses, a lot more than we ever had to in the past.
That is
I mean,
correct.
so we're paying an expense on the top end as well.
That is correct. Now, the difference is the state says we have to offer CCP opportunities to kids. The state does not say that we have to require more than 20 credits. That's a decision that we are making at the local level. So once again, is this going to be a massive financial savings? No, it's not going to be a massive financial savings, but it is going to be a savings in the sense that we're not paying for these kids to take these additional online classes that frankly they aren't required to take as far as the state is concerned. The other piece of it is not just the financial savings, but the investment of time. Whether it be teachers that we're pulling to assist these kids in completing these courses, whether it be counselors who are investing their time in order to. I mean, you know how it is, Keith. I mean, you're dogging these kids every single day for the last 3 or 4 quarters of their career, because you know that they're in danger of not making it. So there is a daily investment of personnel resources in order to get these kids over the finish line. We've just made our finish line a little bit further away than other districts are choosing to. And my argument would be, why? Like, why? Why are we doing that? Other than some sort of false sense of, hey, we can puff out our chest and say that we require more credits than anyone else. The reality is that the vast majority of the population doesn't know that. It's not relevant. Colleges aren't concerned with how many credits we're requiring compared to everyone else. So why are we really placing this additional hurdle there for this small population of kids who struggles already?
And when we went from 25 to 23 and a half, we didn't see any change. I never saw us coming up second place on the sign out front.
No.
Anything.
And listen, you guys know me. I mean, whatever the total is, we're going to bust our tails to surpass it. When we had when we had the highest graduation rate in Ross history, higher than when you were principal here, by the way. The total was still at 25 credits. So we've been able to meet whatever hurdle or whatever the standard has been, no matter what it is. So once again, this isn't about lowering our expectations. This is about removing a barrier for a fairly small population of kids. That is an arbitrary barrier that we've set up.
Mrs. Hayes, do you have any questions? Okay. I just have a couple. I agree with a ton of the stuff you said, obviously, but so of the ones listed here, are any of those schools on block scheduling?
No, I don't know that there's another school in the area that's still on the block.
So that's not really apples to apples, then, really. Just a number,
no,
yeah.
Yeah, no, not really.
I said this 2 years ago, that there's a population of our students, when we lost CBI from Butler Tech, who was paying for it, to add sports medicine or whatever, which is awesome. It's filled. You could probably use 2 of them.
We could.
But I did say at that point in time, we're looking at a group of people and basically saying, we don't care. Now, I know there's a program now, but it was nowhere near what we're getting from Butler Tech. So Butler Tech, by the way, just transferred $31 million from their general fund to PI because they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. I've said this to Chad, and I'll say it to him blue in the face. I think we should fight harder and harder and harder and make him tell us no 50 times to get that program back. That program saved a ton of kids, and Butler Tech paid for it, and we got rid of it. But I do agree, if the requirement's 20, why are we 25? I said that when I was the coach at Hamilton, where the academic requirement at Hamilton for a student athlete to play was higher than Lakota. Nothing against Hamilton's athletic or academics compared to Lakota's, but I'm like, why in the world are we higher? But so I agree with it in that way too, as well. And if we're going to eventually transfer into a traditional bell, which who knows if we ever will, hopefully not, but
Hopefully not.
yeah, but it would definitely.
This isn't leading the way for that.
No.
I don't,
I think that's
yeah.
the question people are gonna ask.
Right.
I would fight that till my dying breath. I mean, I understand that decision is obviously up to the superintendent and board of education.
Hey, I didn't bring that up to say we're.
No, I know.
I think
I know.
that's where mine thought.
Yeah.
No, I am. I mean, as long as I'm the principal here, I will fight against
And the
us
other,
going off the block.
yeah, the other thing I think it's going to do is just get kids out of the building, half days and things like that, which I don't necessarily like that, but if they want to work or something like that, it does help, because they can get in a little earlier than 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is we're already doing that with late arrival, early release. We have to do that, or else we wouldn't. I mean, particularly with the cuts that we have made, we wouldn't be able to house the kids that we have without that. So that is our, the late arrival, early release is essentially our study hall. I mean, but instead of kids sitting in the cafeteria or in the auditorium,
And it's allowing them to get jobs.
Yeah.
I know some kids in my neighborhood that they're able to get a few extra hours because they can get there early.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. We're talking about a fairly small number of kids here that this is gonna impact. I know one of the knee-jerk reactions is, oh well, every kid now is going to graduate after 3 years, and no, that's not our population. That's not the vast majority of our kids. They like being here. They want to take advantage of every opportunity that they can. Particularly with the expansion of College Credit Plus. I mean, heck, why would you graduate when the state is willing to pay for you to go to college for free? So. you know, if I thought that this was gonna compromise, you know, the quality of the education, I mean, I wouldn't be for it. I wouldn't be.
Are you an advocate to bring back that Butler Tech program?
Sure. If it's free, it's for me. You know, so
I mean, it's a good. It was a good program.
It was a good.
Yeah, I mean, it was phased out at the end, and the numbers were low.
And Sean, you probably know this, you know, better than me, being on the board. But I mean, it seems that Butler Tech is kind of sunsetting that program all over,
It is.
all over the county. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, if they were willing to take on the cost of that, now.
Because they got other programs they've instructed their.
Sure.
You know, Fairfield's doing it, and some other schools.
Last school year, I think, Mr. Grant.
Yeah.
I'll meet with them again this school if you're up to, if you want to continue that.
I mean, that's got to come from the
conversation.
board. That's just my
Sure.
personal opinion. I mean, I sit on their board. I mean, there's.
When I had
They
that
can't-
conversation
they-
last year, they were not willing to add
Yeah,
that.
they turned away 1,675 kids on campus, which, that's good. They're marketing great.
Sure.
It's a really, really good place.
If the board wants me to continue to have conversations, I would definitely do that.
And I keep pushing that, if we can't keep them at Butler Tech, why can't we continue to expand programming in our satellites? Instead of transferring $30 million.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to advocate for expansion of Butler Tech programming here in-house. We had conversations, you know, with Dr. Sprankles about, you know, you said it earlier, exercise science. You know, the deal that we made, essentially, you know, referring to CBI is, you know, they said, sure, yeah, sure, they'll
They
get us.
did that to every school.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
stuff.
and exercise science has been an incredibly popular program. As you indicated earlier, we could use another instructor, and we actually advocated for that with Butler Tech earlier this year, and they, you know, declined to grant that, but we're going to continue to advocate for that. So yeah, I would certainly be open to CBI coming back if Butler Tech were willing to do that. Now, what I will say is, you know, we you know, started our own credit recovery program this year. Sean Hoover is doing a great job with that. Helped a number of kids through, and you know, we had several kids who graduated because of our credit recovery program that he instituted. So, and our graduation rate's going to be probably 97.7, you know, somewhere in that, which is right in line with where it's been traditionally.
Mrs. Webb, do you have anything?
Well, you covered it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And so the last thing I'll say on that is that, you know, our district's very proud of our high graduation rate, but like 20 credits isn't the reason why, or 25 credits, or whatever it is, that's not the reason why we have the highest graduation rate. It's because of the quality of our staff and our high expectations, and that's something that's not going to change. And another thing that's responsible is this 32 credits that students have available to, like, they have a lot more chances to try to meet graduation requirements. So, like, what I think will happen is actually our graduation rate will be higher because the credits are at the state level, which is where they should be. So that's my extra 2 cents on that. So,
I believe Mr. Kleinfelder was a 98.3 his last year. It was something like that.
About it.
I believe.
So are we expecting a proposal, and when would
It'll
we
go to
start?
the policy committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Keith, but yes, it'll go to policy committee, review it, send it out to you guys. It's got to probably happen June, July, right?
That's a month, yes.
Starting with what
Right.
freshman class would be my next question.
Well, I don't think you would have to necessarily implement it with the freshman class. I think you could implement it immediately. Because you're not, all you're doing is reducing, you're not changing any of the core requirements. So you could implement it with next year's senior class if you wanted. Now, the other change that we have discussed, the thing that started driving this is we had to update our graduation policy anyway because of the new financial literacy requirement from the state. So essentially what we did was, this was a boilerplate OSBA policy that was given to us. And we, I think the only modification that we are proposing based on what OSBA sent us is there was one line about
Part of like the
summer school, something about original credit in summer school, I think was the only modification that we made to OSBA's policy. So yeah, and I think when we dropped from 25 to 23 and a half, I think we implemented that immediately. I don't think we did that with a incoming freshman class.
So Dr. Coker, what we'll do is get the policy committee together probably mid-June, Heather,
Okay.
like mid-June sometime.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then that way, we can do a first read, maybe in June,
Board approval July.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool, thanks, guys.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna not spend a whole lot of time on here, but, I'll check back in to see if you guys have any questions after I share just a little bit. These are some of the things that were district adoptions or implementations for the 21-22 school year. This isn't everything, but these were some of the highlights for this year. We had some of our district adoptions we did for 6 years, and that would be the Envision Mathematics and the Science Fusion. Those are both 6-year adoptions, which saved our district a lot of money in choosing to do a 6-year adoption. Our Haggerty for Anemic Awareness for pre-K through 3, that's at least a 5-year adoption, so we'll revisit that the year before that 5 years is up. We revised the K through 3 report cards, and so their full implementation will be next year. This year we drafted those and used them as a pilot to get feedback. Our advanced math pathway in 4th and 5th grades for gifted identified students and high achieving students is very successful next year, so we'll be moving that up to 6th grade for the 22-23 school year. I worked with Chris Walters, our gifted coordinator here, and Amy Wettengel. We contracted from the Hamilton County Educational Service Center to get those classes implemented. And the checkpoint assessments, I talked about that a little bit for Ross High School. Teachers have end of course exams, implemented those and piloted those so we could look at how they could be used for high quality student data. Spending a lot of time with this investigations on churches programs and the usage of those programs, like pulling the usage and then trying to align programs vertically and horizontally. That work's going to continue through the next year as well. And then for 22-23, I did bring up that advanced math pathway is moving to 6th grade. Our strategic plan is something that we've been working on within the buildings this year, and so the principals are still doing work to kind of solidify what some of those goals are going to be and action steps are going to be. But once that's completed, everything that we do will be aligned to that strategic plan. These 4th through 8th grade ELA practices, that kind of falls back on some of those alignment pieces I was talking about before. We don't have a lot of programming that's consistent between those grades, so that's something that we're going to work on and form a literacy council for grades 4 through 8 next year. We're going to work on revising the 4th and 5th grade report cards and then draft those for a pilot. Mr. Rettinger and I will work on that this summer. We've got some feedback from the staff. Chad, Dr. Conkle and I talk a lot about this trauma-informed practices and getting a 5-year plan together. We've spent a lot of time talking to 1 and 5 in Mind Peace this year, and then they have also developed relationships with our counselors in the buildings so that we can have some of those conversations. The state of Ohio has implemented a 60-page-ish document for required laws to screen for dyslexia, which need to be implemented in the 22-23 school year, so we're working on getting that plan together. In the 21-22 school year, we implemented a revised K through 3 decision rules for our CSP process, our child studies process, and so we're going to be drafting that again and revising that for 4th and 5th grade. And the last piece on this would be, I know I'm all over on the chart there, but it's this literacy gaps in 6 through 12. We've always had literacy gaps, but they're very glaring since the pandemic. And so we were having conversations around how can we address those literacy gaps across the curriculum, not just in reading or ELA classes. And then, of course, I'm tracy.wright@rossrams.com. I'll reach out to all of you and I'll send you the presentation, and then you can feel free to reach out and ask me questions. Or Mr. Martin, of course. We've got his phone number. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Tracy, just want to say thank you for your leadership this year, and the curriculum department done a great job, and this is very informative.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for having me in this role this year, and I look forward to continuing as the administrative specialist for next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Good luck with your dad.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay, we'll move on to number 4.
Yep, so next section, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Frazier and Mr. Castater to talk about our Plan B savings. There are some documents in your folder, and I'll turn this over to Steve and Jeremy.
Okay, so what we are looking at are 2 different fee schedules. One that includes numbers which would be basically the normal update every year for passing the fees for the upcoming year. And that schedule assumes a successful passage of the August levy. We also have a contingent fee schedule that assumes an unsuccessful passage of the August levy. And everything remains the same between the 2 schedules except the items in bold. Those items are the athletic pay-to-play fee. Goes from base participation fee of $150 per sport with an individual cap of $300 per year and a family cap of $450. And that base participation fee goes from $150 to $825. You will also see in bold the performing arts, fine arts fees jumping from a $50 pay-to-play fee to $140. And basically what those are is we're taking the basic premise that if the levy does not pass and we do not receive any additional funding, our general fund cannot continue to support those activities. We're looking for some additional revenues and some cost savings there, and we've identified those areas for that potential savings. So we will also notice the middle school. We are bringing back a middle school fee for band and choir. We used to have one that went away. We're bringing that back, and that fee would change from $50 to $140 on the unsuccessful schedule.
So looking at these, Jeremy, so basically, let's just use sports, for example.
Yes.
150 to 825. So the 825 number was derived by what?
Okay, so that's obviously that's a massive jump.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that basic premise, what general fund expenditures are in there that are not being covered by the pay-to-play fee? So what those things are, that's transportation,
Supplemental.
that is coaches' wages, so supplementals, that is game workers, those types of things that are currently not covered by, or not being covered by the current pay-to-play fee, where we would like some additional revenue to cover those general fund expenses because we are in such a tough financial situation.
Staying with sports, so and that number is derived by the current participants.
Current participation, yeah. So that's I think that's very important too. So we've got an amount that athletics costs our general fund, and then how many participants we have. that's where that number gets derived from. Now, if the pay to play goes to $825, I would have to think that participation is going to decrease maybe significantly. And at that point, next year, if we still do not have new money coming into the district, we would have to reevaluate that on current participation levels, and just kind of see where we're at as far as what is athletics costing the district and how many participants do we have.
Right, yeah, I looked at it, looked over it. And then you guys you have a couple, does anybody else, just jump in, please, but. So you have some oversight, it looks like, on this fee structure if it fails.
Correct, yeah, basically.
Fine arts.
Yeah, basically the principals and the department heads would be responsible for monitoring that. So for athletics, next year that'd be our AD, Mr. Justin Beck. And for fine arts, that would be Mr. Dick Raymer, responsible for monitoring those fees and making sure that kids are paying in order so that they can participate.
Just reading through this, and students can't participate.
Yeah, you can see the logistics
Yeah.
kind of laid out there. Now, obviously, that 825 could be a burden to a lot of families, so we've got it broken up really into two options. One, you can make one lump sum payment, or we have due dates that we've set within each season
For
to allow
sports,
people to pay $275, three $275 installments, with some guidelines listed there as well that we would not allow students to carry fees over from one season to another. So if you did not pay, let's say you play soccer and basketball, if you did not pay your soccer fee in full, you would not be permitted to try out for basketball until that fee was paid. Nor if you're on the payment plan, would you be able to participate in contests and other team activities if you missed one of the payment plan deadlines. So we have some safeguards built in there. We also put a policy in there about what happens if a student quits halfway through the year, or if they become ineligible, the remainder of fees that are left unpaid would be added to their school fee account.
And I'm assuming you got these from the dates from the fine arts department, like these are good dates.
Right.
And then sports-wise, because some of the sports start and end a little differently, but I'm sure Justin and Jake went through all those. I lived through this at Lakota, and it's a complete nightmare. It's a nightmare. And it's,
I just want to say that our athletic department and fine arts department both have had
You can tell.
input into
Yeah.
these details.
So, does he, I'm going, go ahead, Heather, I'm sorry.
Last time we talked about the overall fee schedule. What were your opinion about paper and athletic costs? I mean, did we look at like what it really costs?
So we did
Sorry,
So you're talking about just general school fees,
Right.
technology, art, what else?
I know at the last meeting.
Physical education, all the different
Yeah.
things, yeah.
Keith had mentioned.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So we did a review. There were several items that were updated for what would be considered the normal fee schedule update, which is the one that says successful passage of August levy. For example, we inputted the fee for middle school choir and band back in. We updated the technology fee. The technology fee is increasing by $5. Yeah, those kind of minimal things. Yeah, we did take a review of that. I know Dr. Conco had more experience, especially going through that last year with the principals and those types of things. But yeah, we did take a review. For example, we updated the preschool fee schedule to match what folks are actually paying, those types of things.
And that's a good passage for the.
That's- Yeah, so, correct, yeah, that would be that would be the norm. The only things that are different are the items that are in bold, which is basically athletics and fine arts, yeah.
So just a point of clarification on those documents, and they're also online, it has the 21-22 school year. So we'll change that, we'll make sure that's updated.
Yeah.
But the 2 fee schedules will be for the next school year.
Yeah.
So we'll make that change.
And Dr. Kunkel, you, does anybody else have any questions on specifics? Amy, you good? Good?
I got a question.
This-
Jeremy, 825 for sport, correct?
Correct.
And there's no cap or family.
No cap, no cap. You got it.
Passes or failed, levy.
Excuse me?
If the levy passes or fails, either way.
No, it'll remain the same if it passes.
Oh,
Yeah. I lied. There's some very small ones, like technology might go up $5. But as far as the athletics, fine arts, besides the one they implemented for middle school, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
well, no, I'm not supposed to be talking, but
That's okay.
aren't we in the hole already with sports at 150? What's going to change that?
Yeah, again, we're not having an open dialogue about it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm trying to answer a quick question, but we can, if you want to talk to Jeremy about that, call a meeting.
All right.
Yeah. So we're having a special meeting June 3rd, already set up, right?
Correct. So at that meeting, we will approve the 2 fee schedules,
Yeah.
along with the concept of a K-12, all K-12 field trips will not be funded out of the general fund next year. So K-12 field trips, if a class or a department wants to take a field trip, that will have to be funded outside of the general fund. So those are the proposals that we're recommending to the board.
Yeah.
So June 3rd will be those 2 fee schedules and the resolution for a potential November ballot,
Yeah, so-
if needed.
Yeah, we'll also have on there the first resolution that needs to be voted on and approved by the board in order for us to certify a levy amount to the Butler County Auditor. It's basically the same resolution that we passed in March, just with timing that if it fails, we have to be ready to go again in November.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I said this on a podcast that I think 3 people listened to, according to Steve Gaspar, maybe 4, but. So, the main thing that, and I want to commend Dr. Kunkel, Steve, and Jeremy, and plus the administration, is the main thing that I think we're trying to do as a school is to be extremely, extremely transparent on everything. What exactly does it mean? So when you walk into a booth to vote, yay or nay, which is your prerogative, I'm not going to get into that conversation, but you know exactly 100% what happens if it passes and what happens if it fails. And if it passes, your taxes are going to go up. I hate taxes more than anything in the world, but I love this school district, so I don't mind it. But in order to get that number for your taxes, you've got to understand how to do that, which is, there's a lot of different conversation. It's not what your real estate market value of your home is. If it's $450,000, that's not how it is. You go to the Butler County website, auditor's website, and you derive that number. So you know if it passes, I, Sean B. Wickman, got to pay, or Amanda too, I shouldn't say that, but $838 extra additional dollars. I understand that, and I understand all our rentals. And also know that if my daughter was in high school, that the fee schedule will stay the same. If it fails, then we're going to go down a path that's not going to be pretty. I mean, the fee increases are drastic. Participation, Jake, you can, attest to this. It's going to go to, we're going to lose 40%, maybe 50%. And now we have family caps and stuff where kids can play additional sports in the spring and so on and so forth. And it's not going away. We're board approving a resolution to go on about in November. Now the millage will not go up in November,
No,
but if it fails in November, it goes up in May.
it will have to, to make up for lost revenue, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could cut our way out of this situation, but we can't. So I think this kind of information helps people wrap their head around what a yes vote means and a no vote means. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind, because they need to do that for themselves. We're in the United States of America, you can vote however you want. But I want to make sure all the information is in front of the voter, and I think you guys have done an outstanding job of doing that. Now, when you receive the information, just like me, you may not like it, but it's the information. So I really appreciate you guys. I know this took a lot of time, this fee schedule, and to go through the details and so on and so forth. So I'll get off my soapbox, but
No, well
I
said.
appreciate you, you guys putting all this together, so.
I think so.
Mr. Frazier, we got about 5 minutes.
We got it, let's do it.
You want to do your
Yeah.
Let's run it. Here we
Let's
go.
do it.
5-year forecast?
Yeah.
Before, while he's setting up, Dr. Kunkel's the 5-year forecast on board docs.
It is, yeah.
And real quick, before we move past the fee schedules, when you guys update the dates and some other things, when will that be on board docs for next Friday's meeting? Will it be Monday?
So it is published 48 hours ahead of time.
So Wednesday?
So Wednesday, correct.
Okay,
It'll be live.
thank you. Sorry, Penny, to cut you off on that.
I misunderstood last time, I thought
That's
we were
okay.
raising sports fees whether it passed or failed.
No,
This would pass.
I think we'll stay the same.
Okay. Let's see if I can work this little thing here. Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to present some financial information. Let's go ahead in the interest of time, let's get right into it. So, look at that. What is the 5-year forecast? Basically, the 5-year forecast is a projection of general fund revenues and expenditures for the foregoing 5 years. I have to present this twice a year and submit it to the state. The initial is in November, and then we have to follow up with an update to that year's forecast in May, and that's what we're doing here. This is an update to the November forecast for FY22. I think it's important to know what we're talking about with the 5-year forecast. We're talking general fund dollars. Again, so that's our operating fund. Also, anything included in there would be any special costs associated with the general fund and an emergency levy, which is something that we are going for in August. So that's what the 5-year forecast is. It has a few purposes. One is we use it for our long-term planning. That's what we use it for. That's why it's important to me that we can forecast what is going to happen in the future to the best of our ability at that particular time. It also serves, gives me the ability to certify the 412 certificate. The 412 certificate basically says that we have enough cash and enough revenues to certify the expenses for the upcoming year. Without the 5-year forecast, that would be something difficult for me to be able to sign. And then also it provides ODE and the Auditor of State with a tool to look at to notice school districts that may be having financial trouble. For example, we were put in fiscal precaution on the November forecast because we had a negative cash balance in the general fund in FY24, so that's 2 years out. We have since made some adjustments, some cuts for the upcoming year and also this year, which got us out of fiscal precaution. But I think it's important to note that all of those, all of that pain and doing those things only push that negative cash balance out 1 year. So what does that mean? That means if nothing happens between now and the November forecast, we will be right back in fiscal precaution, which is not a good place to be. We were one of 16 districts that were on the scale of the naughty list with the Auditor of State and ODE. So it's not a good place to be, and we don't want to go back there. So the 5-year forecast is broken down basically into two pieces, revenues and expenditures. The revenues are broken down between two areas, state funding and what we get from the local folks here in Ross. Expenditures are mainly salary and benefits, which we'll get into purchase services and materials. So if we look at this graph here, this is just a graphical representation of the 5-year forecast. The blue line is revenues, the red line is expenditures, and the green line is our cash balance. As you can see, the blue line is relatively flat, and the red line is ever increasing. And we'll get into some numbers here shortly, but basically we're looking at an increase on revenues of 1.3% a year, while expenditures are expected to go up about 5% every year. And as soon as that red line goes above the blue line, that means we're spending more money than we're bringing in, and you can see what that does to the cash balance. It just falls right off the cliff. And again, we're projecting, if nothing else happens between now and November, we're going to have a negative cash balance in FY25, and we'll be right back in fiscal precaution. So ODE says that a responsible target of cash is about 60 days, which on the graph here is shown in orange, and you can see in red where our cash balance is. So we are below what ODE considers to be responsible, and we'll see those actual cash day numbers here in a little bit. But again, the red is us, and it's not anywhere near where it should be, and they're in estimated 25, we're below zero, which you can see on here in the second bullet point, no less than $0 is required by Ohio law. So that's why they put you in those various stages of fiscal precaution, caution, watch, and emergency to make sure that the school can be sustainable. And here are those cash days of cash. So you can see we're actually predicting, or we're going to have an uptick in days this year of cash. So we're going to end the year with more cash than we had last year, and that's twofold. So basically, we passed a budget in September that was less than previous years, and we also had the ability to take some ESSER dollars, so COVID money, and help save some expenditures in the general fund. We took those grant dollars and paid for things that normally would have been paid out of the general fund, and paid it with that grant. So that helped our general fund. But again, those ESSER dollars are going away. That's a finite number. We can use them to help save the general fund for certain items. But again, we only got so much money, and we're spending that down. So unless those programs are cut, those costs are coming right back to the general fund here, either next year or the year after. Here's a breakdown of our general fund revenues. We get about 40% from the state and 60% from the local taxpayers, of which 20% is our school district income tax. And school district income tax, it's 20%, but that's about the only revenue source that we see increasing at all throughout the forecast period. We have no idea what the state's going to do. They've got a brand new funding formula for this year that was only legislated for 2 years. So we've got a 5-year forecast, but we only know what's going to happen from 40% of our revenue for the next 2 years. So here's a graph that shows basically just that, the percent of money we get from local residents and what we get from the state. We have no idea what's going to happen with the state. those dollars are flat throughout the forecast period. And again, the only thing that we see increasing through the forecast period is that school district income tax. And again, that's a smaller part of our overall revenue piece. So we're only predicting, like a 1.3% increase every year in total revenues, but we're predicting 5% in general fund expenses throughout the forecast period. And there's that number there, the 1.3 and the 5%. Local revenue is basically the only thing that's going up, and the only piece of that we really see going up at all is that smaller school district income tax. And basically the statement is, our revenue, it's simply not keeping pace with the expenses that we have at the school district, especially since 40% of our revenue is coming from the state, and that we're predicting a flat or 0% increase or thereabouts throughout the forecast period. So let's get into expenditures. Wages and benefits, 84%. Any school district is going to have your main expenditure in the general fund is going to be wages and benefits. We are a school district. School districts are people-driven businesses, basically, and that's somewhat normal. We do see benefits and our purchase service are growing a little bit faster than the consumer price index. For example, this calendar year, we had a 9% increase in healthcare costs, and we're predicting somewhere in that range in the next year. So those are things that we're seeing on the expenditure side. This is just a graph that shows basically the percent in graph form of where we're spending our money. Again, the red and the blues are wages and benefits. There are some things that we have done to help curb that. For example, the cuts that I referenced earlier for FY 22-23. But that's where we are. So items to consider. We had a new state funding formula this year that is not substantially providing us net new dollars. We did have ESSER funds, COVID dollars that we have used to offset some general fund expenditures. So what do we do at this point? We can do what any normal people do when they have a financial situation. You can increase your revenue somehow. You can decrease your expenditures somehow, or in our case, we're trying the approach of a combination of those two things. We've already made some tough cuts. I know we would prefer not to make any more, but we need that revenue side in order to do that. So what are we doing? We're looking at a levy on the August ballot, and we've talked about what happens if that passes, what happens if that fails. We've already made some reductions needed for next year. So again, we've got some difficult times coming up. Difficult choices will have to be made. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the summer brings, and hopefully the November forecast will look significantly different than the May update. So, any questions?
Yeah, Jeremy, what's the rationale of the state? Why do they do a 2-year budget, but school systems have to have a 5-year forecast? I know we're trying to do long-range planning, but it just seems like if the state was in sync with the agencies underneath them, it would make things a lot easier, because not knowing what you're going to get 2 years out just seems crazy to me.
It does.
In a $30 million, roughly $27 to $30 million corporation,
Right.
that you don't know what you're going to get from the state when it's 36.72% of our funding.
Yeah, but the rationale, I have no idea. That's what you get when you deal with lawmakers, apparently.
I mean, I don't know, it was the State Treasurers Association or somebody, just seems like, that just seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know that they would ever legislate anything more than a biennium. I mean, you get one governor for 4 years, he gets 2 budgets.
Jeremy, on the real estate tax. It's about 40%, you said, roughly.
Basically,
Yeah, so of that 40%, what's the percent that's commercial versus like single family?
That's a good point. So in Ross, we are, and I think a lot of folks know this, we do not have a whole lot of commercial. So the tax dollars that we get are basically 90-10. We get 90% from the residents and 10% from commercial.
That's a lot of pressure.
Which means any increase is solely on the residents. Yeah, good point.
Ms. Hayes, do you have anything?
No.
I just got one other question for just the audience members. I didn't see any revenue stream there from the lottery. Like, what's our share from the lottery? Because every time one of those commercials runs, showing that there's funding schools in Ohio, I know Cincinnati Public and Columbus and Cleveland get a ton of money. But what does Ross get enough to pay for one teacher?
So we get, there's a couple different revenue streams for that. So we get casino revenue, which we do get enough dollars to pay for one teacher. The lottery dollars, they go into the pot, and that's divvied out by the state. So what that actual number is from our state foundation isn't, I don't have an exact answer for how that breakdown comes from the new funding formula. It's part of our overall what we get from the state, which, as we know, wasn't a crazy good thing for us this year with that new funding formula. So.
The other thing I just want to say is this funding formula for the state has been unconstitutional for over 35 years. There was Supreme Court cases, Durall 1, 2, and 3 in the late 80s that it said basically property tax is not a fair way of doing it because you have the haves and the have-nots. And it went to a federal judge and it was never forced to get fixed. Where if the average person was doing something illegal and a judge told them to fix it, it would get fixed. But our legislature has yet to do that. And, here we are, and it just seems, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bad system. I mean, why you look at the schools around us, you have to keep going back to the taxpayers to ask for more money because of how schools are funded. I mean, there's several districts around us that either have already been on the ballot or will be on the ballot very soon. It's not a good model. But how to fix it, I mean, like you said, they've been trying to work at that for 30-some years.
A good number too used to be around 80% for salaries and benefits. And the retirement system changing, which the legislative report you gave, at least they're going to go back to the years now, right? Not the age.
You're going to get rid of the age 63 mark.
Like we had graduation last night, we had 2 teachers retired, but they were from public tech. So the teachers are teaching way longer now than they were when that 80% number was around.
Right.
Right. Dr. Copeland, do you have anything else on?
I did not, thanks.
So we'll do staffing real quick afterwards.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that good, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break at 7:20. 7:20.